Alright, hello Algebra 1. So this is the chapter 8/9 review because I threw the two sections we did of chapter 9 in with chapter 8 and figured we'd just have a review and test over the whole thing rather than two separate ones at this point. So here's how this is going to work. In the description below the video there's a link to a Google Doc with all the problems that I'm about to go through for the review, so before you watch the video go ahead and open that up so that you can follow along with what's going on. I'm just going to go through the problems just like normal, and the test will look quite a bit like this, but with different numbers, just like normal. So, here we go. Alright, so if you opened up the Google Doc, I left out a few of the directions. It just says simplify in front of these ones. So these ones we are foiling. And foiling, remember, stands for first, outside, inside, last. So first, outside, inside, and last. So we're going to take the first thing here times the first thing here. So x times x gives us an x squared. So that takes care of first. Outside, x times 6. So outside is your outside terms. So the one on the very left and the one on the very right. So 6 times x is 6x. Inside is the other two. So 5 times x is 5x. And last thing here times the last thing here. So you gotta watch out for last doesn't mean this times this. It means the last thing in this set of parentheses times the last thing in that set of parentheses. And 5 times 6 is 30. And then the last thing we're doing with that is just combining some like terms. And watch out for that when we have exponents. So this x squared is just going to stay because this has a squared and these two don't. So we don't want to combine the thing that's squared with the things that aren't. And then 6x and 5x gives you 11x. And then the 30 stays, because that one doesn't have an x. So these ones just want to watch out for, we don't want to make it any simpler than that, because that one has a squared, that one has an x, that one doesn't have an x at all. So we don't want to lump any of those things together. So we're only combining things that have the same variable with the same exponent. Alright, and we'll erase that. Okay, same thing here, just watch out for that minus. So first thing, same, we got first times first, so 2x times x gives you a 2x squared. Now watch out for when we're taking the outside, we've got a 2x here, and we've also got that minus 9. So you could either call that a minus, and 2 times 8 gives you, or 2 times 9 gives you 18. So you could either call that a minus 18x, or you could call that a plus a negative 18x. Same thing, I don't care which one you have. And then we got that 8 times an x gives you an 8x. And that one's a plus because that's a plus and that's a positive. So that minus only goes with that 9. And then we got 8 times that minus 9. So either a negative 72 or a... So either minus or plus a negative 72 there. And again, the last thing we're doing is we're combining our like terms. So 2x squared can stay. And watch out for, we've got a negative 18x and a positive 8x. So negative 18 and a positive 8 gives you a negative 10. And again, that could either be a minus 10 or a plus a negative 10. Either one's fine. And then the last thing we got is that minus 72. And again, either that or plus a negative. So either this or 2x squared plus a negative 10x plus a negative 72. Either of those two things would be okay. So either this or this, you don't need both. And again, don't want to combine any of that once we've got it. That's 2 that kind of ran into my, there we go. Kind of ran into my circle there. Okay. So either that or that, either one's fine. Don't combine anything after that. So we're only combining things that have the same variable with the same exponent, or lack of an exponent. Alright. Same sort of thing on the next one, but with more negatives. Alright, so we've got a 3x times a 2x, so 3 times 2 is 6. X times x is an x squared. So as long as we have an x here and an x here, you should always end up with one term that's x squared. And then we got outside, so we got that 3x times that minus 4, so that's going to be a minus, and 3 times 4 is 12. And again, either minus or plus a negative, just not both. And same thing on the inside here, we got that minus 5 times that 2x, so either minus 10x or plus a negative, just not minus and a negative, because the last thing we have is a minus and a negative. So you can either call that a minus a negative 20, or if we have a minus and a negative, that's the same thing as a plus a 20. So either that or minus a negative, and then again, we're combining like terms, so watch out for we're adding a negative 12x and a negative 10x, or taking a negative 12x minus a 10x. Either way, they're both negative, so we're getting deeper into our negatives, so 22x negative there. And again, either minus or plus a negative. And we've still got our 6x squared, and we've still got our plus 20 at the end. Or minus a negative 20 if you left it like that. Alright. Now, this last one of these, if you happen to remember that there's a shortcut, cool. If you don't happen to remember that there's a shortcut, that's okay. We can just FOIL that. So we got a 4x times a 4x. 4 times 4 is 16. X times x is x squared. On the outside, we've got a 4x times a minus 5. So we got a minus 4 times 5 is 20. And that's got an x. 5 times 4 is also 20. And that's also got an x. And 5 times 5 is 25, and minus because that's a minus. Now, what happens when we have a negative 20x and a positive 20x? They're gone. So this is gone, that's gone. So we just got our 16x squared, and then watch out for don't lose that minus that's in front of that 25. Now, if you happen to remember that there was a shortcut there when we have a positive and a negative of the same thing, it's just this and this term, cool. If not, your middle term's canceled out. No big deal. Just a little extra step there. All right. Now, we're going to go backwards. If you don't already have it jotted down somewhere, you're probably going to want this. So this was the thing that when we're factoring trinomials tells us whether we want two positives, two negatives, or one of each. So if you have an x squared plus a something x plus something else, so if everything's positive, they're both positive. If we have an x squared minus something x plus something else, they're both negative because we want things that multiply to this last number. And in order to multiply to a positive and add up to a negative, they need to both be negative. If our last thing is a negative, we've got one positive and one negative. This middle term just tells us which one's bigger. So if we have a positive number here, our positive number needs to be bigger. If we have a negative number, our negative number needs to be bigger. So I would take a second and jot that down before we go on. I'm going to assume you pause the video and jotted that down. Okay. And the other thing you probably want to remember is that, oops, I should grab that, is that we're looking for numbers that multiply to this. So we want numbers that multiply to this. And depending on whether that thing is plus or minus there, we either want numbers that add up to this number, or we want numbers that subtract to this number. So if this last number is positive, we want numbers that are going to add up to your middle number. If your last number is negative, you're going to want numbers that subtract to it. Or if you want to think about it as we have a positive and a negative that we're adding, then you can still think about it as adding. Either way. Alright, so once you got that, the first thing we want to do is figure out whether we have two positives, two negatives, or one of each. So if I've got an x squared plus an 8x plus a 15, and I want to factor that, that's positive and positive, so everything is going to be positive. So I'm going to have an x plus something and an x plus something. And remember, we're looking for things that multiply to our last number. So we're looking for factors of 15. And 15 is pretty nice. You really only got a couple. You've either got 1 and 15, or you've got 3 and 5. Those are really the only things that go into 15. Now, if you weren't sure what went into 15, if that was a bigger number you weren't sure about the top of your head, just start plugging things in and say, okay, well, 1's going to go into everything. Does 2? Okay, well, 15 divided by 2 gives me a decimal, so I don't want that. Does 3? Yes, it does. That gives me 5. Does 4? Nope, that gives me a decimal. And then once we've made it to 5, we've already got that one, so we don't need to write it again. I mean, if you really want to write 5 and 3 instead, you can. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just not going to do anything either. Okay. So then we're looking for the pair of those that add up to 8. So you got 3 and 5. That adds up to 8. 1 and 15 doesn't. Okay, and watch out for, as long as everything's positive, order doesn't matter. So you could either have this, or you could have this, and either one would be fine. So as long as those are both positive, you don't have to worry about which one goes away or which one goes with the plus or the minus, because they're both plus. And if we're multiplying things, order doesn't matter. So either this or this. Alright, same sort of thing down here. So watch out for, if we have a minus and a minus, watch out for that doesn't mean we have two minuses. It means we have a plus and a minus, and our minus is our bigger one. So we're going to have an x plus something and an x minus something. And since this one's a minus, we want to put the bigger thing here, because that's going to give us a negative when we multiply these and a negative when we add them. Okay, so then we're looking for factors of 40, and 40 has a few more than 15 did. So we either got 1 in 40, 2 goes in there, 2 in 20, 3 doesn't, and again, if you're not sure, go ahead and check it. 40 divided by 3, that gives you decimal. We got 4 and 10, we got 5 and 8, 6 doesn't, 7 doesn't, 8 does, but we've already got it, and once we've got a repeat, we can stop. So then we're looking for the pair of those that subtract to 3. Now, usually you'll be able to tell if you forgot that they were supposed to subtract, because if you're looking for things that add up to 3, none of those are going to add up to 3. None of those even get close to adding up to 3. So we're subtracting, so we want that 5 and 8, that's going to subtract and give you 3. And in order to get that negative 3, we want the 8 here and the 5 there. And again, order doesn't matter. So I could do this as long as that minus stays with that 8. So if you're going to flip-flop them, make sure that minus stays with the 8. So it can go here or here, but it does need to be the one that has a minus with it. Alright, so either this or this. And any of these, if you want to go back and double check them by foiling it back and saying, okay, well that's x squared, this is a plus a 5x, this is a minus 8x, and 8 times 5 is 40. And sure enough, if I combine my like terms, I get the thing I had at the start. Just watch out for, if you're doing that, that's not the answer. This is still the answer. This is just us checking the answer. Alright. Now, these last 4, if you're looking at the directions on the review, it says solve using any method you like. So if you want to factor all 4 of these, you can. If you want to complete the square on all 4 of these, you can. Technically. If you want to quadratic formula all of these, you can. So I'm going to go through all 3 ways with all 4 of them. So feel free to skip through the parts of the video if you've got one preference for one way that you prefer doing them. You can do them any way you want on the test. There are a couple that I wouldn't recommend completing the square on here, but either of the other ones, fine. Alright, so, number 7. If we want to factor this, that's probably the quickest way to go about this one, especially if you happen to notice that we already factored it back in number 5. So if you happen to remember that this factors into x plus 3 and an x plus 5, we're halfway there. Oh, we're halfway there. No, okay. I can tell you from through the computer that you're groaning at that. Okay, so once we're here, we just want to remember not to stop there, because these ones we're solving for x. So I want to go through and actually find x. Now remember, if we have things that multiply to 0, one of those 2 things has to be 0. So we're going to end up with 2 answers here. So either x plus 3 equals 0, or x plus 5 equals 0. And then we're just solving those. So we're either subtracting 3 here or subtracting 5 here. So we've either got negative 3 or we've got negative 5. And just watch out for it. These ones, you want to make sure you've got them both. So 7, 8, 9, 10, you should have 2 answers for all of those. So watch out for that. All right. And if you're factoring it, you're done. So factoring is probably the quickest way to go here. You could also, jot that down, you could also say, nope, I'm going to complete the square. So if you're completing the square, remember we want to end up with an x squared plus an 8x plus something, and that something is half of your middle number squared. So half of 8 is 4, 4 squared is 16. So we have this, we want this. So the question is, how do we get here from here? Well, if we want to get from 15 to 16, we're just adding 1. But if we add 1 here, we've got to add 1 here. 0 plus 1 is 1. Now, the reason we wanted that in the first place is we can take this and we can rewrite it as an x plus 4 squared. And then once we've got that, if I want to get rid of squaring something, we're going to square root it. Now, when you're doing that, watch out for where that to answer thing is coming from. Is the square root of 1 is either a positive 1 or a negative 1. So that's where your two answers are coming from. And then we're subtracting 4. And we're subtracting 4. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Negative 1 minus 4 is negative 5. Cool. So that's completing the square. That's another thing you could do. The last thing you could do is you could quadratic formula this. And if you don't already have the quadratic formula written down in like 5 different places, you're probably going to want to write it down again. So your quadratic formula looks like x equals opposite b plus or minus square root. Terrible plus or minus there. Plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a ding. Alright, so if you don't already have that somewhere, you're going to want that, especially if you're planning to quadratic formula any of these. Now, again, this one probably just supposed to factor it, but you can also do this. So watch out for, if you're doing that, this is a, this is b, this is c, and if there's not a number in front of there, it's a 1. So when you're plugging in a, b, and c, you're not plugging in like 1x squared, you're just plugging in that 1. So a is 1, b is 8, c is 15. So we got opposite b plus or minus square root 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 15 all over 2 times 1. Ding. Alright, so we got negative 8 plus or minus 8 squared is 64. 4 times 1 times 15 is 60. 2 times 1 is 2. And negative 8 plus or minus 64 minus 60 is 4. And the square root of 4 is 2. And then once we're there, we're splitting that up into either a plus or a minus there. So we've either got negative 8 plus 2 over 2, or we got negative 8 minus 2 over 2. Now, watch out for, if you're doing it this way, if you're a plug it into your calculator at this point person, either plug in that negative 8 plus 2, hit enter before you divide by 2, or throw some parentheses around the top, because it'd be a real shame to get that far and then get it wrong because you forgot to do that. Okay, negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. Over 2 is negative 3. And negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10. Over 2 is negative 5. And boom, we got the same thing as before. So those are 3 different ways to do that. Pick whichever one you like best. If you want to do this on all of them, I mean, you can. Nice thing is it works on all of them. It's a little bit longer, but it will work. Alright. Alright. Same sort of thing on this next one. So you could either say, I'm going to factor this. And if you're factoring it, watch out for, if we have a minus here and a plus here, that means we actually have 2 negative factors, because we want things that are going to multiply to 11 and add up to that negative 12. So we're looking for 2 negatives there. So an x minus, an x minus. Nice thing is 11 only has 2 factors, 1 and 11. So we got 1, we've got 11. You don't really have a whole lot of options there. Conveniently, they do add up to 12. Alright, so we've got that, and then we've either got x minus 1 equals 0, or x minus 11 equals 0. And then we're adding 1. So we've either got 1, or we're adding 11. So we get 11. And there we go. That's one way to do it. If you want to complete the square on that. And again, feel free to skip any parts of the video that you decided you don't want to watch because you prefer doing it the other way. So if you prefer factoring, feel free to skip the next minute or 2. Okay, so if we want to complete the square, we want half of this number squared. So we want to end up with an x squared minus a 12x plus a half of 12 is 6. 6 squared is 36. Technically, this is a negative 6, but negative 6 squared is also 36. And then if you want to get from 11 to 36, now if you're not sure off the top of your head what you need to add to get from 11 to 36, one way to get that number is to take 36 minus 11, and that'll give you the 25 that you need to add there to get from 11 to 36. And then we got to remember to do it over here too, because anything we do to one side of the equation, we got to do to the other side. Alright, now the reason we wanted this in the first place is we can take it and rewrite it as an x minus 6 squared equals 25. And then we're square rooting that. Square root. So you've either got x minus 6 equals a positive 5 or x minus 6 equals a negative 5. So again, that's where your two answers are coming from. And then if we want to get rid of subtracting 6, we're adding 6. These gone, those are gone. 5 plus 6 is 11. Negative 5 plus 6 is 1. Cool, so that's complete and square on that one. If you want a quadratic formula that one, just watch out for negatives. So when we're quadratic formulating, we say x equals opposite b, because if b is already negative, it's going to turn positive. So again, a is 1, b is that negative 12, c is 11. So we get x equals opposite b plus or minus square root negative 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times 11 all over 2 times 1 thing. Right. So we get 12. Now, watch out for if you're plugging that negative 12 squared into your calculator, parentheses around the negative 12 and then square it, because you want to make sure you end up with a positive 144. Minus 4 times 1 times 11 is 44. Over 2. Alright, 144 minus 44 is 100. Square root of 100 is 10. And again, any of these square roots that you don't know off the top of your head, feel free to plug it into your calculator. You probably knew that one. Okay, so we've either got 12 plus 10 over 2, or we got 12 minus 10 over 2. 12 plus 10 is 22. 22 over 2 is 11. 12 minus 10 is 2. 2 over 2 is 1. And there are two answers again. Yay! Alright, so you should end up with 2. Alright, now it's going to get a little bit trickier, because we threw a number in front of our x. So, if you want to factor this one, you still can. Just remember that instead of an x, if we want to end up with a 2x squared, one of our things is going to have to be a 2x. And again, if this is positive and that's positive, they're both positive. Now, one like this, you could probably just do with a little bit of guess and check. Your only options for factors of 3 are 1 and 3. So it's either a 1 and a 3, or a 3 and a 1. So those are really the only two options you got going on there. So I would go with guess and check on this. So if we try 2x plus, let's say, 3, and then a 1 here, if we FOIL that back out, we've got our 2x squared just fine. But then we've got a 2x and a 3x. That doesn't give me 7x. Okay, so that tells me it's probably the other one. So it's probably that. And if we want to check that, we've got 2x times x still gives you 2x squared. 2x times 3 is a 6x, plus the 1x gives you that 7x. So this is the one we want. Alright, so then we've got a 2x plus 1 equals 0, or an x plus 3 equals 0. And then watch out for, we're subtracting 1, and then we've got another step. So you got this 2x equals a negative 1, and then we're dividing by 2. So you got negative 1/2. And then over here, we're just subtracting 3. Cool. That's one way to do that. I'm not going to go through an example of completing the square on this one, because we didn't really talk about what to do if there's a number in front of there and you're trying to complete the square. If you really want to know, I can make you another little video on that, but you would end up with some rather not nice decimals here, so I would either go with factoring or the quadratic formula for this one. If you really want to learn how to complete the square on one like this, we're going to cover that in Algebra 2. Okay, so if we're quadratic formulating this, we've got x equals opposite b plus or minus square root 7 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3 over 2 times 2, ding. So we got negative 7 plus minus square root. 7 squared is 49. And 4 times 2 times 3 is 24. 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And I got negative 7 plus minus square root. 49 minus 24 is 25 over 4. Square root of 25 is 5. So we've either got negative 7 plus 5 over 4, or we've got negative 7 minus 5 over 4. So we've either got negative 12, we got negative 12 over there. So we've either got negative 2 over 4, also known as negative 0.5, or negative 1/2 if you like. Fractions or decimals, not a big deal here. Negative 7 minus 5 is negative 12. So those are our two answers. So either this or factoring. I would personally not go with completing the square here. Again, if you really want an example of that, I can make another little video with that, but I'm guessing we're probably good. Alright, so either that or that. Alright, this one. One more of these. So, big thing here is realizing that there's something we need to do before we either start factoring it or plug it into the quadratic formula, because all of that stuff with factoring and saying things equal to 0, that only works if it equals 0 in the first place. So we're either going to take both of these and scooch them over here, or we're going to take this one and scooch it over here. I'm going to scooch these two. Again, you could do it either way. Personally, I like to keep my x squareds positive, but you can do either one. So you got a 5x squared minus a 6x minus an 8 equals a 0. Or if you'd subtracted the 5x squared instead, what you'd end up with is a negative 5x squared plus a 6x plus an 8 equals 0. You'll end up with the same thing. Alright, and then we're either factoring that or we're plugging it into the quadratic formula. Now, if we're factoring this one has a few more options. So I'm going to go through an example of the box thing. Now, if they're jumping out to you without the box thing, that's fine. I'm just going to go through an example of the box thing so that we have it. So, if we got the box thing, we've got a 5x squared. So your first thing goes here, your last thing goes here. And then remember, we're multiplying those two things. So we got a negative 40x squared. And then we're looking for factors of that negative 40 that are going to subtract, because we've got that minus there, so subtract to 6. Okay, so factors of 40. So we either got 1 and 40, pretty sure we did 40 before, or we got 2 and 20, or we've got 3 doesn't work, so 4 and 10, 5 and 8. 6 doesn't go into 40, 7 doesn't go into 40, 8 does, but we've already got it, so we can stop there. And then we're looking for numbers that are going to subtract to give you 6, which is good, because none of these are going to add up to 6. And 4 and 10 subtract to 6. And then if we want that to be a negative 6, I'm going to make that a negative 10x and a positive 4x. Okay. So now, remember with the box thing, what we're looking for is we're looking for the biggest number that we can divide out of our rows and our columns. So we're not looking for what does this times this give you. We're looking for what's the biggest thing we can take out of both of these two. So the biggest thing that goes into 5 and 10 is 5. And we get an x squared and an x, so that's got an x tagging along with it. And again, if you happen to remember that all of these are going to give you an x something here and a not x something here, again, as long as you set it up with your x squared here and your constant term here, that's just a little thing you can use to double check and make sure you get your factors. So this thing should have an x, this thing shouldn't. And the biggest thing that goes into 4 and 8 is 4. Now, you may notice 2 does go into both of them, 4 is bigger. So we're looking for the biggest thing that goes into both of them. And then we're going to do the same thing with our columns. Okay, biggest thing that goes into 4 and 5 is just 1. That gets an x, because both of those had an x. And the biggest thing that goes into both 8 and 10 is 2, but it's a negative because we got that minus there. So we got an x minus 2, and that 5x plus 4. And then just watch out for, we're not done, because we still want to go x minus 2 equals 0, or 5x plus 4 equals 0. Should have left myself a little bit more room here. I'm going to get rid of these factors over here. Equals 0. This one you probably don't need a whole lot more room because we're just adding 2. So x is 2. Or, over here, we're subtracting a 4. So you got 5x equals negative 4 divided by 4. Sorry, divided by 5. And we've got either negative 4/5, or if you want to decimalify that into negative 0.8, that would also be fine. So this and this, we want them both. I don't care if you have that as a fraction or a decimal. Not the main point right now. Alright, so that's factoring. This is one where it might actually be easier to go through in quadratic formula. But either way, we've got the same first step. So either way, we've got that. I'm just going to rewrite that there so I have a little bit more room. So either way, we've got our 5x squared minus our 6x minus 1,008, right? Yeah, equals 0. So either way, we're starting off with that. So that's your first step, whether you're factoring it or whether you're quadratic formulating it. And again, I'm not going to complete the square on this one. If you really want an example of that, I could show you one later. Okay. So if we're quadratic formulating this, we've got x equals opposite b. And remember, this time it's positive because opposite b. So if b is already negative, it's positive now. So we got a, b, and c. Plus or minus square root negative 6 squared minus 4 times 5 times 8, negative 8, all over 2 times 5, ding. Alright, watch out for your negative. I'm going to make that right there so it's a negative. Alright, so we get 6 plus minus square root. And again, watch out for if you're plugging that one in, that one you probably know off the top of your head. But if it's a bigger number and you're plugging it in, parentheses around that negative 6, so we got 36 minus and a negative, so I'm just going to change that to a plus. So if you left it as a minus a negative, that's fine. If you change it to a plus, that's fine. 4 times 5 times 8 is 160. No. Yes. Yes. Okay, I'm doing this in my head. Shouldn't do this in my head, that's why I was ended up having to go back and redo this section. Okay, so we got 6 plus or minus square root 36 plus 160 is 196 over 10. And the square root of 196, again, if you're not sure that one off the top of your head, feel free to plug that into your calculator. I just happen to know that that one's 14 because it's one that pops up a bit. And then once we're here, we've either got 6 plus 14 over 10 or 6 minus 14 over 10. And 6 plus 14 is 20. 20 over 10 is 2. 6 minus 14 is negative 6. Negative 6 over 10 is either 6 minus 14 is negative 8, Miss P. And negative 8 over 10 is either the negative 0.8 that we had, or if you want to call that negative 4/5, or if you left that as a negative 8/10. I'm not going to fret about reducing these things. As long as you got here, that's the point. So if you left it like this and call that negative 8/10 instead of negative 0.8 or negative 4/5, that's something I'm not going to dock you for at this point. Not the major point here. The major thing is getting from this to this. Once you're here, I don't care if it's a fraction or a decimal. Alright, and that is the chapter review. So go ahead and email me once you're done with this, and I will give you a link to the test, and I will see you in the next video.